All right, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Two Planker Podcast. I'm your host, Ethan Schaefer, and today we have Jeff Curry joining the show. Jeff is an East Coast legend, and after 19 years of riding for Line Skis, he is retiring to focus on his leatherworks business, Dark Forest USA. Links will be in the description to find his website. You can go there and get yourself some handmade goods straight from Jeff himself, coming out of Portland, Oregon. As always, if you like the show, be sure to subscribe and give us a rating. Follow us on Instagram at TwoPlankerPod, and send us a DM if you want to see someone on the show. That's all for the intro. Hope you like it. All right, here we are back with another episode. And Jeff, would you like to introduce yourself for everybody?
Hi, my name is Jeff Curry. I'm a East Coaster that migrated out to Oregon and been kind of involved in a lot of different facets of the ski industry, from owning a small business to coaching to somewhat of a competitor in my younger days to now kind of more focused on like the judging realm.
Sick. Cool. So this is actually interesting because this is the second kind of retirement, moving on to other things podcast I've had in the past month. First it was LJ, and then I saw your announcement. So I kind of just wanted to do the same thing where we go over kind of some of the greatest hits of your career, and then explore what's for the future, if that's cool with you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I kind of like I wanted to like make a statement, but it was not meant to be a retirement because I never really thought too much of myself as like a pro skier. So the career was like kind of like figuring out how to make skiing work for my lifestyle. And um I just found through social media with like leaving my last company, I never made a statement, and to this day, I get people that are confused and they ask me, how's Treefort going? And I'm like, I have to explain, well, I don't do Treefort anymore. And so this was me kind of getting ahead of the curve of like, okay, like people associate me with line skis for so many years, and I wanted to just kind of like step down and move on to different parts of my life, and also just explain to people like kind of what's going on. So it wasn't necessarily like I'm leaving skiing, I'm retiring. It just was a way to kind of express that, like, if you see me and I am not on a pair of line skis, like, hopefully you already know the story because I'm trying to tell it.
Yeah, sick. So you mentioned that you're an East Coast guy, and I told you that I got a lot of family up in the Berkshires. So do you want to explain what Pittsfield, Massachusetts is like, and kind of the scene there, especially what it was like growing when you were growing up?
Yeah, so when I was growing up, I started out racing, and I was like so focused on like becoming a ski racer. And there's a huge kind of group of racing people out there that just like, you know, that's all I knew. And there wasn't really freestyle skiing at that time when I was like 7, 8 years old. So this was the option. We didn't have moguls. And then kind of like the late 90s, you got ski blading and the X Games. And kind of my story was like one of the local guys was in high school. I was probably in middle school. He was sponsored by Solomon, went to the X Games a couple times on snowblades. Um, and I'm watching him rip around the hill, doing these backflips, like underneath the chairlift. And I just had this like realization. I was like, what am I doing? Like going to race practice. I'm like, that looks fun. So I started jumping more. I could do flips when I was young. So I just kind of left the race skis and got on some twin tips, probably like 2000, and just started to kind of like explore that realm. And at that time, there was literally only one other kid in my high school that like knew about like what was going on in like the old Poor Boys movies. So there's only two of us in my hometown, but then when you spread out to the rest of Western Massachusetts, New York, there's all these other kids that were part of that like beginning scene, you know, like Will Wesson and Andy and Eric Olson in New York. Jack Borland was from Western Mass. There was all those MSA guys from Parker White, Chris Logan. So there was this like awesome little scene that really started there, and it's grown so much that now there's all these, you know, kids in high school that have twin tips, but when I was growing up that just wasn't the case. But we were just driven by the movies and like beginning of new school days. There was this website called SAS Films. That was like the first thing that like had uploaded clips of skiers doing cork seven. So I remember like, you know, dial up internet days where you would go and you would literally watch one single clip. It would take 8 minutes to load, and then you'd see somebody at Mount Snow doing a cork seven. And so that was kind of like my upbringing back on the East Coast.
Nice. I mean, do any of those early movies stick out for you? I know that like a lot of the East Coast guys. What was the one? Was it Wicked? I think was a East Coast one out of Mount Snow, maybe.
Yeah, Wicked, it kind of like came a little bit later. It was like a couple years into like free skiing starting to blow up, but it
Hmm.
was this guy Neil who was filming a lot of the riders at Mount Snow, and he kind of assembled like the best guys. And that movie is extremely epic in terms of like old school East Coast movies. But for me, like growing up, my like favorite thing to watch was like the Eric Iberg films. And Royalty was the one that stuck out to me. And that pretty much like is where I positioned my skiing. Like I wanted to be the people that were in that old movie. And then, you know, I'd gotten the matchstick movies. I got the Poor Boys, but I like am forever shaped by that first Royalty movie.
Yeah, that's so sick, man. And so I was reading some articles about you, and it's so funny to see how skiing's changed. This is the same thing I encountered when I was doing like the Steve Stepp research. Um, there's articles on ESPN about like specific athletes. Like, well, I found one about you, written by Ethan Stone, and this one said that so you played baseball every spring, but then your sophomore year of high school, you decided to give up that job to give that up to get a job to pay your way to summer camp at High North. Does that sound pretty accurate?
Yeah, so I kind of always been involved in sports, and I kind of had some shoulder issues, and kind of like moved away from baseball. And yeah, I decided every day after school I'd go to work and save up money to go to High North, which back in the day, those films, they always had High North shots. There was Tanner and Pep. They were hitting the quarter pipe, sliding this dragon rail. And it just seemed like that's where I needed to go, just to like experience it. And that like forever kind of changed my life just going out there. And you know, I didn't really know what I was getting into when I like wanted to do it. But I saved up like enough money. I think at the time it was like $1,500. And then my parents paid for my plane ticket to Whistler for my birthday. So um, I found myself out there, and once I saw everything that was going on, that's when I like really committed to like the idea of like this is what I want to do. Like this is who I am, and I want to be involved in it.
Nice. And so, what was that? What job did you get to save up that much money?
Well, this kind of ties into a little bit of like kind of where I'm at now, but I worked in a plastics factory, so it was like injection molding, and a good family friend owned this plastic factory, and I went and worked. It was like a one of the kids I used to grow up racing with. It was his dad. Um, so he gave me a job and I did like a number of different things there, but I got to see like making a product and kind of what it is like to like be in a factory. And like my town, so you asked me about Pittsfield, like Berkshire County is a really cool place to live and grow up. And there's so many different like kind of aspects to it. But my town specifically was like the manufacturing town in that community. And they used to have like one of the largest GE manufacturing plants on the East Coast. And that's where my grandfather worked. He was a foreman in a factory. And so I kind of took this high school job and worked on some of the machines, did kind of some odds and ends stuff. But the goal in the end was just to save up money and go to summer camp.
Yeah. I got to ask you because I'm curious. Since I told you, I guess I got a lot of family up there. What was your view of Great Barrington when you were growing up? Because that's where my whole family's at. It's kind of hard, if you're not growing up there, it's hard to tell like how that fits into the region.
Yeah, so kind of so I had the one friend that was in my high school that I skied with, but then there was a couple kids from Great Barrington that also skied. So I had a lot of friends that were like outside of my high school and hometown. And Great Barrington to me was like what the Berkshires really like is when you tell people about Berkshire County, like Great Barrington is like the hub of this like artistic, creative, beautiful community that I just like my parents had, pretty typical jobs. But when you go to Great Barrington, your friends' parents are artists, they're metal fabricators, they're just like a little bit more outside the box. And the houses just are a little bit different. They're not cookie cutter. They're just like, it's kind of like it's just unique and a little bit, I don't want to say zany, but like it just breeds like music and all the kind of like the art side. So to me, that was like kind of like the cool place to go hang out. Like the kids that were growing up, they always knew about things that like I didn't get exposed to, whether it was music or different like lifestyles and paths that you could go down. So kind of like opened up my eyes to like, you don't have to go down the straight and narrow and go to school, get a good job, sit in an office. So it was like kind of exposed me to like, hey, you can be creative and, find a different path.
Hmm. Yeah, and Great Barrington also has Butternut, which I don't know back in your time, but right now it's probably the best terrain park in southern New England because I don't know, they just have a nice mellow run. It's pretty long, and they have a really good park crew that hooks it up.
Yeah, Butternut was really cool. It was a little bit further away from my house. I had gone there a couple times and they did like a couple cool events. They did this like Ice Coast Open. So they had like really cool rails and a really fun park. So we'd go there, compete. And there was also this like handrail out in front that like was in snowboard movies. And so we would go and set up the handrail. I remember one night we like put our lights out and filmed it. And yeah, it was really cool. But I just grew up like 10 minutes away from Bosque, so it was just so convenient. Where Butternut was maybe about a half an hour away.
Mhm.
And my dad worked in the rental shop at Bosque to get us season passes, so I just had everything covered there. Where I would have to pay for lift tickets if I went to Butternut.
Yeah,
To
nice.
this day, it's still holding up, and they're still doing a great job. And I think my home mountain is getting revamped, and so they're trying to kind of maybe nip at the heels a little bit and establish themselves a little bit more in that realm.
That's great. Yeah. So, and after that, in very New England fashion, you go to Champlain College, and I know a bunch of people that went there. So, what was your decision making going to Vermont rather than out west, since you had already been exposed to it a little bit?
Yeah, so I when I was graduating high school, I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do, and I knew I wanted to ski, so I only applied to two colleges. Applied to Boulder and then Champlain. Champlain was kind of my backup because I just knew I wanted to go to Colorado. But my dad sat me down and out of state, school. He basically broke down the numbers and was like, "Hey, we're gonna give you a little bit of money, but like we can't pay for your college. So at the end of your 4 years, this is what your debt's going to look like if you go to UC Boulder. And this is what your debt's going to look like if you go to Champlain." And that was pretty eye opening to me. Like, you don't really think too much about debt in college when you're that young. And also just like the whole Colorado scene, like being so far away from the mountains. I didn't have a car growing up, so it just didn't seem very realistic for me to like go to Colorado, be 2 hours away from Summit County without a car. I can barely afford, the things that I'm going to need. So it just didn't seem realistic. And it kind of just fell into place where I was like, okay, I guess I'm going to Champlain College. And I'd been to Burlington a couple times for rail jams. And I was totally cool with the situation and ended up being like a really, really great decision looking back because the people I got connected with and then the path that I took was completely affected by that like East Coast hub of a community.
Hmm. Yeah, and so when I was talking to LJ, he said that he went to UVM, and he said that Burlington was like actually like a pretty big scene, kind of what you're saying. So who were you? Who was part of the crew back then when you were at Champlain? Did you kind of start meeting some other people in the region that were trying to do the same thing you were doing?
Well, I had kind of like met most of them through like these rail jams because like growing up in the East Coast, you're willing to drive like 4 or 5 hours just to like go hit a rail. So like when you did that, you would see the same faces at every single place. Mount Snow would have a big air. You'd see all the same people. So in high school, I like come across kind of the people that were like investing their time in it. And I had a good friend, John Wachecki. That was the guy I was talking about in my high school. He went to UVM a year before me. And so I'd visited him. He ended up like rooming with Will Wesson. And I kind of like, I spent a little bit of time with them, but I also kind of got like more integrated into like my college and my like the guy I used to roll with was a snowboarder. He was my roommate for like 3 years. And
Hmm.
so I didn't really have like a huge crew. It was like kind of like me and my roommate. We'd go snowboarding or skiing and we'd hit the park. And then you'd kind of like, LJ was popping up and, some of the UVM guys. Um, but it wasn't like a big like crew scene. It was kind of like just me trying to get some street clips, get different tricks for competitions, and then really you'd see everybody at the competitions or the rail jams.
Hmm.
But there was like I do remember specifically Letty Park was like the beginning of the year. Will always built these rails and like chained them up in the woods, and then Letty Park had a ice skating rink and dropped the snow outside. So we would every spring we would or fall we would set up these rails and just try tricks. So there was like a handful of guys that kind of ended up turning into like the Meathead crew, or like Meatheads kind of brought them in. So those were kind of the guys that I used to like, always ski with.
Yeah, and it's a bummer to say because I feel like I caught the very tail end of it. But the rail jam culture, like you were saying, when I was like, what years would that be? That'd be like the early 2010s. There were still rail jams, and you would see these dudes come, like the YMR crew, which was like the early like Tall T Dan and all those dudes. They would come down from Vermont and they'd be skiing, at a ski sundown rail jam in the summer. But the sad thing is like those don't really happen anymore. So there's not as much of a cohesive community within New England as there was before. And like what you're describing, it just sounds so sick, and it's so funny because now everyone's familiar with that crew that you're talking about. But back then, I feel like that's just how New England rocked. You know, it was kind of a small community, and everyone just kind of knew each other.
Yeah, yeah, no, it was awesome to grow up in that time, but it was also like the beginning of the sport, and like it's just changed so much. It's like matured like past its teenage years. It's like in its 20s now. So like sometimes you kind of look back and you're like, oh man, the way it was so cool. But like things change and they evolve, and it's just kind of like it isn't what it used to be, but that's because that's just how things like move forward.
Mm. It's
Snowboarding
evolving.
isn't the same as it used to be, and it's probably for the better, so but it does kind of it's just kind of a bummer that the way it was isn't what kids are experiencing now. They're just getting a whole different kind of like intro to the sport, and the competition scene is just so narrowed, where we just had so many cool opportunities, and it was just like excitement and passion that was involved in like creating all this stuff. And I think a lot of that has just kind of gone away, especially because of the Olympics and like the all the dangers that are involved, and it has to be like so protected from like a to get your parents to sign off on this stuff. It's just very different from what, because it used to be like you'd slide down a rail and you get to the end and you got a clip. Now if you're not 270 on with a switch up and like pretzeling out, like that's not a clip anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. So keeping the looking at the timeline that I kind of have written down. So it seems like Meatheads, and they're the recurring character in any East Coast guy. It seems like Meatheads was kind of the first breakout film that you had. Was it Head for the Hills that they contacted you for?
Yeah, so kind of what happened to me was one of the athletes got hurt, and I think it was like a knee injury. I forget who it was, but they needed like another rider. And so the team manager for Line at the time was like, oh, well, hit up Curry. He's in Burlington. He might be a good option. And they called me up, and of course I said yes. That was like what I had been wanting to do. I was doing it on my own, but it was just like this kind of was more legitimized, and they ended up kind of like throwing me more into like kind of like tree skiing and backcountry stuff. And with like my background in racing, I just had like decent form and like could make it look good. And so after the first shoot, they just invited me on another one and another one and another one. And so almost all that film was um, all backcountry skiing, which is kind of weird to say backcountry East Coast, but it was besides like maybe the Sunday River heat harvest stuff. I didn't have any rail clips. I didn't have any tricks, which was kind of what my focus was for the last 8 years. But I kind of found that I excelled in the other side, and I think they needed more people like that because they had rails and jumps covered with Will, LJ, Clayton, Nick Martini. Those were the guys that they were putting on park shoots. So I kind of like filled this little space that ended up like getting me like a ton of shots in that movie.
Hmm. Yeah, and what was the vibe like for the seriousness of the production? Because last night I was going through some of the trailers because Meatheads has actually done a surprisingly good job of like not having any of their stuff pirated online. And I was looking at the trailer for Ski Gods, which was like 2006, and it really just looked like a low budget traveling circus. Like it looked like I think it was a follow cam of Will Wesson through the park with like a shaky fisheye shot. So how serious was this crew about filming, or was it kind of like a lax production that just had a lot of talent pulled together?
Yeah, so it was really laxed. they like obviously just progressed as they started making movies. So like from the first one to the last one, they just got better and better. And they brought in new people, and there was like no pressure. It was like really easy going, and they paid for everything. So it was this cool experience where I got to go to these places that I never would have gotten to, and I didn't have to open up my wallet once, which a lot of other film companies, like, you got to pay your way through a lot of this stuff. So um, I got mad respect for those guys, and I think they just got better and better as they were like kind of got into their filmmaking um, kind of process. So
Hmm. And so, yeah, based on what I've heard sporadically, because I feel like nobody's really dived in on this, and you obviously know a lot of people in the industry, but the production company paying for everything really seems like a rarity from what I've heard. So, what is that like for like an up and coming skier linking up with X, Y, and Z production company, and then that production company saying, "Oh yeah, let's go to Europe, but you have to buy your own $1,500 ticket." Is that how it goes? Like, what are the finances for someone that's like trying to be? I mean, obviously, like it's different for every company, but what does it look like for someone coming up in like the film scene?
yeah, so it definitely is different from every company, and I can only tell you what I know. But a lot of it, like the film companies have kind of gone away now. But it was basically like the ski sponsors would put money into the film, and then the director would use that sponsored dollar to pay for those athletes. So you used to see a lot of guys that were in the movies because their ski sponsor specifically gave that company money. And that was like whatever their contract was, hey, we need to have this guy, and this guy in this film. And so Line was like a headline sponsor. So I don't really know like specifically like what took care of me in that film besides Line, but there are other experiences from different people that I know where they're like, the company gives the film money, but they're still spending their money for beer, snacks, or whatever at the end of the night. But Rooster and Jeff paid for everything. They would pick me up in their car, they would drive me there. They would take care of breakfast, lunch, and dinner. They would buy us beer, so they just kind of just took care of us. And I don't know if that's like specifically unique to my experience, because I know there's other companies that probably did the same thing, but I also know of a couple companies that kind of kept the money in their control and didn't really release it to the athletes, which puts more pressure on the athlete to, have another job or do something else that covers their travel.
Hmm. Wow, that's interesting. Um, cool. So after that movie, I'm not sure where Prime Cut falls in, but it seems like after kind of your film breakout, you suffered a pretty bad ACL injury, from what I've read. So do you want to go into that and kind of what happened and the ramifications of kind of being stuck in bed?
Yeah, so I just done that Head for the Hills and kind of like started to feel the momentum. And the next year I was like, okay, I'm gonna do even more. I was kind of lined up on a bunch of, I was just gonna be included in the next film. And I set up my classes to be all online for the semester, so that I could travel and still continue my school. But the first or second day I got on snow, I ended up like tearing my ACL. And it was kind of like one of those situations where I just got a new pair of skis mounted, didn't check my DINs, and like my heel was just at like 11. And it didn't release. It was just like a weird twist off a rail, nothing like crazy. And my knee just popped, did meniscus damage, and couldn't finish out the year. So that kind of led me to like, what can I do next? And I knew I wanted to come back, but for the time being, I kind of like decided like, not to get surgery right away. I didn't want to be hobbling around Burlington in the icy, hilly streets with crutches. So I just like rehabbed and ended up like linking up with a couple kids and kind of like getting a little coaching program together. And within a month and a half, I was back on snow. So it's like early November, I tore it. And then, you know, halfway through December, January, I was like back on snow, just kind of cruising around and started coaching some athletes, like super young kids. But I was like thinking maybe like if I wanted to do something after college in the ski industry, maybe coaching was like a good route. So I wanted to like get some experience coaching kids. So I just kind of took that on. Um, and it was like a bummer that like I didn't get to partake in the film. But it was like years later after I moved out to Oregon that they called me back for the last film. They were trying to like organize some of like the athletes that had been in like the films throughout the years, and they wanted to just include me in like um the final 10-year movie. And so I actually traveled back from Oregon after I moved out and started working at Windells for a couple weeks to film with them on that film.
Hmm. Cool, yeah, because I had Prime Cut written down, but I could have looked when it was made, but just wanted to ask you.
Yeah, so actually, this is a funny story. I wanted to like, I haven't really shared it with anybody, but so there was this one shoot that they were trying to do for years in Michigan. I think they did it one year with Garai, but it was like the snow like rarely hit it, but when it did, it like was amazing. And so they were like, "Oh, we're gonna have you come back and film uh, these powder shots." And I'm like, "Okay, cool. Like, this is what I used to do. It's very comfortable." And I had just like broken my wrist, and so I'm sitting at home, like trying to like figure out how to pole plant with a cast on. And I'm like, I can't do it. It's just going to look weird. So I made a decision to cut my cast off like a couple days before I left to like start to break it loose again and figure out how to pole plant. And when I got back, they were like, oh, yeah, the snowstorm didn't hit. You're going to go hit rails with LJ. And I'm like, what? Like, I thought I was going to be skiing like trees and powder. And like, I have this like pretty fragile wrist, and you're going to send me out with LJ. And I just know the stuff that he hits. And I'm like, the whole time I was shooting, I was just so nervous, like not to fall or put my hand down. Um, and so that whole like whale's tail thing that we did, like, I'm just trying my hardest not to do anything like so far outside of my realm, which I just used to go hard when I was a kid. I would fall, I'd blow up, and I've gotten hurt quite a bit. But I was like really trying to push myself not to do that, but still get a clip that was like worth putting in the film. So that was kind of a crazy experience for me to like go from broken wrist to cutting it off to all of a sudden trying some of the hardest things that like you're gonna fall,
Yeah.
and yeah, it was a crazy experience.
So that was the shoot with the whale tail backflip that you did.
Yeah, it was like that. We hit like a stair set in Burlington. We did like a handful of kind of like more urban features, and it wasn't necessarily just like all rails, but it was kind of like cool little features that they'd already filmed so much, so it's like kind of like filling in things that haven't been done that are a little bit more outside the box. Um, and then LJ just like whatever he sees, he's gonna do something crazy on it. So it's like you're gonna show up to a spot with LJ, you got to do something that can compete or look good next to his clips. So it was just like kind of a nerve-wracking experience. I thought it was gonna be nice and chill and just get some powder bopping and no, it was like sliding metal and cement stairs. And then that whale's tail jump was kind of like ridiculous getting pulled in by a snowmobile. There was no snow. They basically scraped all the snow to build that jump. And it was pretty large. Like it was, I mean, but looking back, it was like one of the coolest experiences to be part of because it's like an iconic thing now. And it was like, I was there. I got to like partake in that. And I don't think anybody's ever going to get that opportunity again. So I was kind of honored to like be there while that all went down.
Yeah. And the photo from it too. I mean, obviously LJ takes the cake, and I've already probably talked. I think this is the third episode where I've mentioned it, but the photo Dan took of you ripping the backflip over that is pretty up there for ski photos.
Yeah, no, I was stoked to have that. And I did like a rodeo 7. And basically like the story of that day was like myself, Will Hibbs, Ross, and LJ. And I basically I wanted to do double backflip over it, but like I said with the wrist thing, I was like so nervous, and that's really what I wanted to do on it. I ended up like backing off, and once LJ started doing the 12, we had already got a couple clips each on it. I got like the backflip, I got Road 7, maybe one other thing that just didn't make the film. But we all decided collectively, like, let's just give LJ this chance. Like, because we already got shots. We weren't like, we could have gotten a couple more. But we just realized how important it was for the film and for LJ to get this shot. So, literally, the last 2+ hours was LJ trying that duck. He tried it like 40 times and he landed on his feet every single time, but he kept blowing up on the landing. So like he got it right at the end, but we kind of like all rallied behind LJ and sat back and watched him just chuck his meat, and the rest goes down in history.
That's awesome. Yeah. So shout out to the Meathead guys. Those guys really did a good thing for the East Coast. We were talking about this before. So you have the ACL injury, so you gotta kind of have to reevaluate yourself, and then you're also graduating college in 2009 in like the worst job market ever. So how did you end up landing at Windells, where you ended up staying for almost 10 years after that?
Yeah, so with like Will and Andy and LJ and those guys, there was this guy, Jeremiah Paquette, who was a snowboarder, and he would hit rails with us, was just kind of like very in line with like what Will was doing. And he went to UVM, and he was a year older than I was, and he moved out to Windells the year prior. And I kind of was like searching for a coaching position, and I applied for like the Mount Snow Academy job and just didn't really look outside of like the East Coast. And I think the word got out that I was looking, and I remember like exactly where I was, but I got a phone call from Jeremiah. It's kind of people kind of know him as Germ. He was the Saga person forever. He called me up and was like, "Hey, do you want to coach with me at Windells for this weekend program? We need a coach." And I was like, "Really? Uh, like, let me think about it." Like I just had kind of came out of the blue, and then when I thought about it, I was like, I I need to take this opportunity. So, like, without really searching for other jobs, I kind of just bailed on what I was doing and set my sights on Oregon, and moved out there, and first started out like in the winter where most people get hired in the summer. So I was working with just a couple kids on the weekend. It was like local Portland, kind of Mount Hood area kids, and they were doing like USASA events. And so that was like my first real job coaching, um, outside of like the kids I rallied together. And then once I completed the winter, that was all I was guaranteed, was like, a winter job. I did a good enough job where they wanted to keep me around. And then I went into the summer program. And once I experienced that, like I didn't want to do anything else. There was like, I felt like I kind of landed in the right spot. And after like a couple summers, I ended up progressing to like the academy side of Windells, which was kind of just starting up when I got out there, and it got big enough where they needed an assistant coach. So after one of the summers, I got hired on to be assistant coach for Windells Academy because they had went from like 2 or 3 kids to 6 or 7, and they just needed an extra coach to kind of roll with the crew.
Hmm. And so I've been looking forward to asking you about this because I read this in the article and I thought it was funny. So you probably coached a lot of the kids that a lot of the younger guys that are kind of dominating the scene now. And so in this article that I read, it said that you were coaching Nick Gepper and you pulled him aside and you basically told him, "Dude, your style sucks. Fix it." Is that true?
Yeah, I mean that was like a quote from Ethan. I probably said that, but basically, I worked with this guy, Mike Hanley, and he was like this extremely like good coach at the technical side of things, but he didn't really like pick up like on the style. And so it was almost like our relationship was like good cop, bad cop. He would like push them into these rotations, and then he would like cling his poles and get so excited when they would do something like that they'd never done before. And then I would come in and I would just knock them down and basically just destroy their style and try to like, you know, now looking back, I probably would have approached it differently, but I used to just hate on like those things and basically instill like, yeah, you did it, but now you need to do it like way differently and you need to like fix this. And Gepper was kind of like coming onto the scene and I just saw like his trajectory. And if he kept going in that like technical side, he was gonna get a lot of hate on the style side, which I think affected him and he kind of fixed some things, but like he kept going in that direction. And so I was always there to remind him, like, hey, don't just go for the next rotation. Like, try this 10 more times and figure out your grab, figure out this and that. And so we had like a cool little relationship where I kind of just picked him apart. And I think that's what makes me a good judge at this point is like I'm able to pick apart skiing and not just see like the rotations and the technical side, but also seeing like what makes our sport so unique is the style aspect. And I know what I am attracted to, um, but and I can like help people go in that way, but it's also like a free sport to do whatever you want. So I think you should be able to make it look however you want. So I kind of like evolved into like figuring out what they wanted and then helping them kind of achieve their style and look and not just saying how I wanted it to look, which I think a lot of coaches now specifically just kind of like have this formula and they like push you into this kind of world that makes a lot of the same or a lot of the athletes coming out of the same hills look the same. Like I go to a lot of different events and like I can pick out Waterville kids all day long because they're coached by the same guy. They do the airbag and they just have a specific style. So it's kind of like takes away from like the individuality that like Nick has his own style and that's uniquely his. And then you got Henrik that has his own style. And I think the more we push the individuality and keep it just safe from the aerials, the moguls, that kind of side of skiing, it's only going to help us moving forward rather than pushing into this like last year this run won. Now you need to learn this run. You need to do it this way. It's like it needs to be free and open, and I think that's kind of what attracted me to the sport in the beginning. So
Mhm. Yeah, so I mean, by 2010, there was a lot of camps and a lot of academies. Did you have any of the other guys that people might know?
so when I was assistant coach, Alex Blue Marchand came out, and then Alex Hackle came out when he was super young. So those are like kind of the guys that are still like resonating in the sport. Alex has kind of moved on from competing, but those are the three big names. And then past that, there was like a handful of like extremely talented kids that just never reached like the highest level. Um, but it was like amazing to kind of see Alex Hackle's like work ethic and like his climb, because he had the biggest climb out of all three of those, and he found his spot where Alex came out and he had a huge amount of talent before he got there, and then he was able to excel that forward. And I think the same for Nick, because Nick was very talented and driven. So he had already reached this level and just needed like a couple steps forward, where Alex really kind of like took the biggest leaps in the shortest amount of time. And it really like came down to like how hard he worked, how passionate he was, and like determination. And like he didn't care what anybody said. He went and did what he wanted to, because that's what he like. He came to our academy because the coach at the school he was going to, which was it was at Sunday River, I forget the name of the school, but the coach told him he would never be anything in skiing, and basically like put him on like it'd be like benching somebody in a basketball game, not giving him the opportunity. And so his family decided like he needed someone that would support him. And to me, that's like the coolest thing, that like he was told by somebody he would never do something, and then he came out and he did it. And like, to me, that was like the biggest success story that like I experienced. And I walked away like learning so much from those kids, even though like I'm the one that's like supposed to be teaching them. I have like more life experience. Like I gained so much knowledge and appreciation from working with those guys, because they're world class people. And in order to reach that level, it's not because of your coach, it's because of who you are. And so I walked away just learning a lot about myself and like how to achieve your goals by working with kids that were so goal driven and determined. And yeah, it was like, I think, a great experience for both of us, or all of us. I don't know what they'd say about me, because I kind of did play that bad cop role a little bit. But it was like, I think that was kind of my tactic, was to like make them feel like it never was enough, so that they kept going, instead of like settling and feeling comfortable like I got it. It's like, no, go do it again. Like that really like wasn't what you thought it was. Like you can do it better. And so um yeah, it was a kind of a cool experience, to go from like a mildly successful skier to like a coach that like the athletes started to be successful. So like I kind of like um, got to share that experience with them.
Yeah. I don't know if you've seen the movie Whiplash, but it's funny to imagine you as the hardo drum teacher from that movie, just in their face telling them that their style is bad, no matter
I
what they do.
wasn't yelling at them, like I wasn't like the bad cop in a TV show, like screaming, but I would definitely like, just harp on them a little bit. And,
Yeah, definitely. So when did you start moving into the kind of entrepreneurial space with Treefort?
so it was kind of like once I was at Windells, we used to have this, it was like a coaches sale, and I would just see all these kids with money. They come and want to buy stuff from the coaches. And I didn't have much stuff to sell them, but I would watch some of these like kind of higher end skiers, like people that had more sponsors than me, that had all this gear, and they're make like selling all their stuff to these kids. So I kind of like started thinking like, okay, what could I sell to the skiers that come every summer? And I just also recognized that like Grenade and Saga and all these companies kind of started at Windells. So I kind of had this plan of like, what could I make that isn't really existing, rather than just putting a logo on something and selling a hat or a t-shirt. It's like, what can we make that is missing in the sport? And at that time, all these like people with Red Bull helmets, Tom Wallish, LJ, they're in all these films, they're wearing shoelace suspenders. So there's like that age of shoelace suspenders. So my friend and I decided that we were going to make suspenders for skiers. And that's like really where it started from.
Wow, that's sick. And so, I mean, like you said, you grew up kind of in a manufacturing town. You had a manufacturing job. So, like, what was the importance of making stuff within the U.S. for you?
Well, where I grew up and the time that I grew up, the kind of government decided, it was like Bill Clinton's years. He basically decided that they wanted to start opening up trading with China. And so once you saw, it was like the North American Free Trade Agreement. Um, they started to allow China to partake in the global economy. And that's when you saw all these jobs just jump overseas. And so the town that I lived in was a huge manufacturing town. And as soon as they had the ability to do that, everything left my town. And so my town was like kind of like booming back in the day. And then it just started to like crumble. So for me, it was like, kind of coming from a middle class family and like working in a factory, it's like that's what middle class citizens do, is they go to work. That's what Detroit was built on. There's like so many of these cities that were manufacturing towns, and now you've seen the crippling effects of the towns falling to pieces because they don't have jobs there. So once I started making products, I realized that I just wanted to like do it the right way and like build up communities and keep our money like to and give it to people that like need it. Not that like the rest of the world doesn't need money to survive, because I think manufacturing overseas can be done the right way. So it's not like US made is the way to go. But that was just like my kind of like driving force. And Treefort at the time, we were like really stuck on like having the symbolism behind our brand and our logo. And so part of it was to like lift people up around us. And so that was like kind of tied into our branding, was to like lift the community and like build this platform that was higher than us and just support um, local people.
Hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, what did that look like at the time supporting local people? Like, were you hooking up your buddies with jobs? You're like, hey, dude, I just started this company, and they're like, oh, sick, I'm gonna go work for Jeff. This is awesome. Like,
Well,
what did it look like?
we started out with a guy in Vancouver, Washington. So he was like making stuff out of his garage. He had like a team of like 3 or 4 people. So they were like building our suspenders and kind of our smaller products. And that was kind of like us just figuring out how to make something with somebody else, because we first started like making it all ourselves. And the company never really got past like more than one employee. We had somebody employed for us, but it wasn't like making enough money to like create this team. But we did end up finding a factory in New York, and we shipped them a prototype. They built us some stuff, kind of quoted us out. And so the last probably 3 or 4 years, we were working with this company. I'd never been to the factory, but we were like building all of our stuff in New York, sending them our labels. And, I wanted it to get bigger and better than that. It just, for other reasons, it didn't really go super big at the time. But it was like we were giving this company in New York like a ton of work to do for us. And we ended up going from like, 50 travelers trunks to 250 to 1,000. So we were just kind of like building our quantities and um, kind of like figuring out how to make something, which wasn't something my partner and I learned in college, how to manufacture something. We learned more like the marketing sides and the things of like building a business. So that was like a really cool experience to learn how to kind of take an idea to market,
Mhm.
which it took a little bit longer. Like we both had full-time jobs, so it just took a little bit longer rather than like, quitting our jobs and then doing this full time. So it took quite a bit of time to scale.
Mhm. And so, I mean, at the very beginning of this, you mentioned that you left that company, and people still think you're affiliated with it. So, what was your departure like from that, and how soon afterwards did you start Dark Forest?
Yeah, so kind of the catalyst for me was I had like another knee injury and I had been taking like kind of like a financial hit trying to get this company to the point that we could quit and go full time. So we were putting all of our money back in and not taking it out. And so I was like draining my finances for years. And then I blew my knee, crashed my car on the way home from the hospital, found out I didn't have car insurance because I had moved out of my house and the car insurance bill was in my old mailbox. And so I got like slammed all at once and like found myself at like completely bankrupt. And so I had to like work my ass off through like 3 or 4 different jobs while doing Treefort and like got myself back together. But at that point, I realized that like I can't do all of these other jobs and run this business. Like I when you own a company, you always put your company first. It's your baby. And so I was like putting the company well beyond before myself. And then it just got to a point where I was like, I need to like focus on myself, which sounds selfish, but I just had to like kind of self reflect and be like, what's the most important thing? And like, myself is the most important thing. If I'm not healthy and strong, I can't do this job. And just, yeah, I think it was probably 6 months of like going to the gym 4 or 5 times a day, doing construction for, 5 days a week, 40 hours a week, also doing tree fort at the same time, and then doing like 1 or 2 other things. So I literally did not have a break for 6 months and it just wore me out. And then I think I just had a shift in my mind. It was like, I can't do this forever. And we had gotten to a point where we didn't know what our next move was. We weren't really covering our own salaries. So the discussion was like, how do we grow this? And we couldn't decide on that decision. We were just split. And so it was kind of like at a standstill. It just kind of stuck for a year or two and wasn't moving forward. And so I think the only way to have it move forward was to step back and have one person make decisions rather than 2 people with conflicting ideas that just pull away from each other rather than working symbiotically in a forward direction. We just couldn't agree on that direction.
Yeah. So, so when I mean that first of all, that really sucks that you got hurt and then crashed your car on the way home from the hospital. So, like, how long was it until you were, no pun intended, back on your feet and you were able to start up a new business?
Um, well, so that was when I was 30. It was like it was terrible. I turned 30 and then like within 10 days, all those things happened. And it was like, when they say the 3 things, they come in threes. It was all 3 things that just crippled me. And while I was at Treefort, I started to get like kind of like invested in like quality, like what's going to be like the highest quality, long lasting thing. And I kind of like stumbled into leatherworking. Didn't know what I was doing at first, but I started to like kind of make some wallets and do some stuff. So I was producing like a small line of goods for Treefort under that brand. and kind of learning as I went with it. Um, and so I don't know exactly the timeline because it took me about a year to get back to like skiing and trying stuff again. Um, but I just had like a shift in my mind and in the back of my head, like we had kind of had like conversations of like splitting the leather away from the business and kind of like making it more of my thing, or we just didn't really know where it was going to go. And then I decided at one point that like, yeah, I'm just going to go for it. I'm going to make my own logo. I'm going to make different things, not the stuff that I'm making for Treefort. I'll continue to do those, but I'm going to like kind of, I went more like the Etsy route and just tried to like make a little side hustle for myself. At that time, I stopped doing construction, so I was kind of like a little bit more back on my feet and kind of got a little bit more stable. And I think I was doing a lot of judging at that point, so I was like traveling a bunch, making a little bit of side money, and then yeah, I decided like let's come up with this new brand and I'm going to do it on my own. And like out of like some of the frustration with my business partner and not agreeing on things, it was like I can take it into my own hands and I can make decisions and just go with it. So I think in 2019, the end of 2019, when I going into Christmas, that's when I like kind of got my stamp made a couple things, built an Etsy, and that's where I really kind of like kicked that off.
Hmm. Yeah, and so you want to do a quick plug just for like what products people can find with your company while we're talking about it?
Yeah, so I kind of like just the way it's evolved. I wanted a couple different things in my lineup, so I've kind of just been focusing on like kind of minimalist wallets, and really like high-end materials and just like the more handcrafted constructions. So I've kind of flirted with a couple different ideas, but I do like mainly wallets and then small leather goods that could be like little keychain lanyards, trays for your desk, notebook covers, and I have like a small line of like dog collars and leashes and stuff like that. So it's kind of like accessories, wallets, and a little bit of dog stuff. And moving forward, I have some other ideas, but I think I'm gonna kind of like just focus on that and really get my production and quantity and efficiency up before I try to go into another line of goods. So if you want to check it out, you can go on Instagram. It's called Dark Forest USA. That'd be darkforestusa.com. And you can reach out to me on Instagram, check out my website. And I'm constantly just doing like new colors and kind of like some new designs. So I'm kind of just filling out the lineup of wallets. So hopefully I reach, I make a product that reaches almost every single person. So from small wallets to big ones, I'm trying to cover that basis.
Mhm. Yeah. So that's the money maker now. But you're still involved in the ski world, like you said. So how did you get into judging? Because I feel like that's kind of a how would you describe it? I don't even know. Like you don't see job postings for judges. Is basically what I'm getting at. Like it seems like a very inside like industry insider type of thing. So what was your route into judging?
Yeah, so at that time, there was another guy at Windells, Jason Aarons, and he knows me really well and kind of like saw like that I wasn't paying myself for my company and obviously wanted me to succeed. But he said, hey, like there might be an opportunity where you could, make a little bit of side income. It's not a lot of money, but you could, we could use more judges is basically what he was going for is like how, and he's still working on like how to get new people in because it like you said there's no job postings. But I did have the background in coaching and like the trick recognition, which is the biggest thing is being able to recognize like what's happening and then evaluating the difficulty and the style and all that involved in it. So he kind of just got me into a couple of events and I realized that like I could work on the road because a lot of what I was doing at Treefort was like the marketing side, sales. So I could bring my computer, I could still do my work for Treefort. And while I was gone, they cover all your expenses. So I wasn't spending any money as long as I didn't go out to the bar and spend, too much on drinks. I would make a little bit of money, but then I was probably traveling like 3 to 4 weeks a month. And so I wasn't spending any money while I was gone. So it just ended up being like kind of a cool little thing for me to like, just kind of like hold strong for a little bit and save money, make a little bit. And also just like the connections I made on the road, I would find new customers all day long. Where when I'm stuck in the woods in Mount Hood, it's such a small community. I'm not like branching out and finding new customers. So it was like a win-win in terms of like where I was going and what I wanted to do.
Wow, cool. So what's currently on your what events do you have in the rotation for your judging right now?
I just wrapped up two. I did Dewtour this year, X Games, and I'm going to go to Switzerland for the Junior World Championships in March. So, kind of like this year, my focus has been like doing less events and trying to do like higher end events so that I have more time to focus on my business, because this one is a little bit different where I'm not just doing marketing, I'm building the product. Um, so I kind of decided I wanted to like dial back, and last year kind of ended up doing that anyways, just because of COVID and how hard it was for events. So I went from probably doing like 8 to 12 events a year to like I just really wanted to do like one event a month, because that's all I can afford in my schedule. So I'm pretty stoked about that, and took me quite a while to get to the point where I got invited to do Dewtour X Games. That was like the overall goal, was kind of you put your time in, did a bunch of B level events, did a bunch of C level stuff. I go to nationals every year, which is kind of cool to see like kids from all over the country. So I guess I didn't mention that, but I'll probably be at USASA nationals, and that's beginning of April. And it's just like hundreds of kids. And it's a crazy work week, but they're all so stoked to be out there, and it's kind of cool to see like you get to see like some of these kids that just you're like that kid could be somewhere one day. Like I remember specifically like Nico um was competing at it one year, and he could just see this kid in his slopestyle run. He was just like light years ahead of everybody. So that was kind of cool, like see where he is now. Kind of went more in the half pipe world, but yeah, it's like you can recognize talent when it's there, when they're like 10 years old and they can do like both way cork nines, and you're like, what the hell? Like I work so hard in my life and I can't do a right cork nine. Like, and this little kid is just slaying it. Like it's just, there's no effort.
Yeah. Sick. So I mean, we talked about this before, and I went over this on the episode with Jeff Schmuck. Like being a judge is difficult, and it's thankless, and you're often the bad guy. So do you want to give some like insight into what the judging setup is like at X Games, and what's going on behind the curtain, and how many people like I don't know how specific you want to get, but like who's involved, how does it work, just to like give people some clarity for what happens.
Yeah, so at each event, it's kind of different from like World Cups to B level events. So like if you're doing like a Rev Tour, there's no television. You're watching it from so far away. You don't have any replays. So like you watch a half pipe run, it's really hard to see if they're grabbing, if they're slapping their boot from all at the bottom of the pipe. So in turn, you get a bunch of like angry coaches because they think you saw it wrong. Maybe you did. There's room for error. Then when you get up to the higher levels, there's television, there's replays. which is good and bad. So with X Games, they want scores in super quick because they're on a TV schedule. And this year there was 3 scoring judges and 1 head judge. So the scoring judges are the ones that are writing down the runs. They're trying to figure out numbers for each run. And the head judge is the one that's kind of overseeing it. He can relay to the TV guy or the person inside of our booth, hey, we need to see this uh, jump 3. We need to see if that grab was locked in. So he's managing the group. We're scoring it. We're having a discussion. We get our scores in. And once the score is in, the head judge signs off on it and says, good, we can move on, because it's basically like certifying the score, because sometimes you need more space in terms of like the numbers, and the pace at which X Games goes is just super fast. And they're very, very professional. And it was like an awesome experience to be part of, and kind of like go from like sitting outside in the cold in a booth, writing on a piece of paper, to like being in front of a screen in a heated container, and having replays. So you can like be like, I think he grabbed boot. Did he touch his hand, or was it just like, was it a supporting hand, or was it just like a little bit of a knuckle drag? Because all those things make a huge difference. And we're very critical on mistakes, execution, difficulty, and all that stuff. So it just being a judge sport, there's so much room for error and debate. So that's why it causes a lot of like issues at the end, because everybody sees it differently. But in the booth, we all get to have an opinion, and then we unify our opinion and move forward. And sometimes there's disagreements, but it comes down to a vote, or um, sometimes the discussion goes pretty long and it can kind of get heated, but that's kind of like our sport. And there's a lot of passionate people involved that are either athletes or judges.
Overall, these are not decisions or things that you guys are taking lightly. Like it seems like you guys are in the booth really you guys really care about what's happening and the decision. It's not something that you're just carelessly, oh yep, throw this out, throw this out. Like you guys actually really give a shit about the sport and the future of it and the competition.
Yeah, I mean, my whole life has been in the ski world, so that's like what I care about the most. And the future of the sport like needs to be taken seriously. So everybody that goes in, they're not doing it for the money; they're doing it because they're passionate. And we're all debating different, you know, parts of the sport, and that's like kind of like what you see online, is people are debating it. And so that's what we're doing in real time. And we're doing it like to the best of our ability with years of experience, and acknowledging like what the athletes want, because there's a lot of conversations that we have with them. Because a lot of us, got to a certain point of the sport, but we've never done 1800s, so like, is a forward dub 18 forward to forward, is that harder than a switch 18 switch to switch? And so there can be a debate either way. So how do you score one above the other? We go and talk to the athletes. We get to understand like what's easier or harder for them. And kind of what we found out is it does come down to each person. So we're assigning difficulty to these tricks, but not each trick is more or less harder or less harder to certain people. And like, coming from my, coaching athletic background, like a forward dub 18 would be so hard to land, because you're coming in blind. So you're not visibly seeing your landing, which to me is more difficult compared to a switch 18, where you get to see at 16, you get to see your landing. You can just shift your hips in, you get a better spot. And so that would be like what I would think. But then it's talking to some athletes, they're like, no, it's actually easier. But to another athlete, it could be harder. So that's like, we've just gotten to this crazy part of our sport that like when you watch the big airs, it's just so incredible that they are doing what they're doing and performing it the way they are and stomping. Like the Olympics that just went down, like there was a couple crashes, but everyone was so on point, and the amount of rotations and like or well executed grabs was just like insane. Like it's just so crazy. And then your job is to assign scores for those and keep things tight, also separate things. So it's not an easy job, but because we are like invested in the sport, it's something that we all love to do, and we all love talk skiing. That's why I'm like here talking to you. Is like I love talking skiing, and when I get to go in a judging booth, I get to talk skiing, and I get to have a different opinion from the guy next to me, but we all respect each other, and in the end, we have to make a decision. So not everything is like 100% agreed upon, but at the end of the day, do we have to create a rank, and so that's what we do. And sometimes we don't hear a word and everybody's happy, and other times we could be getting beat up for 3 weeks after an event because the internet just doesn't lay off. They just keep going and going, and so it's kind of uh it's like a catch 22. I get to do what I love, but then you're going to make people upset. They could be your friends that are competing, or the coaches, or the internet.
Yeah, definitely. And people generally have a short memory in terms of every year people say it on it, like when they're all the complaining after X Games, there's people in the threads like, "Yep, everyone will forget about this in a week," and then bitch and moan next year about the same thing. So it's a vicious cycle, and I'm certainly not jealous of your job in that regard. Um, Cool. So we're at the point we're at the our cutoff point. I would just like to slip in some viewer questions just to let these kids get their questions into you, if that's all right.
Yeah, let's do it.
Cool. So just a few. We have Mans Moliga. His name is very hard to pronounce. Shout out. He's a ski sundown kid. He said, "Why line skis?"
Line was like, I just remember the first like twin tips that came out, that came into my ski shop, and that's such a good question because I'm looking back at it, and it just was like, probably now that I think about it, my favorite team growing up was Line. So it was like five guys. It was Eric Pollard, Mike Wilson, Scogan Sprang, Dash Long, and Mike Nick. And so I just liked their skiing the best. And so it was really the team that basically influenced me into like feeling the vibe of this brand. And so the videos that I watched, the people I aspired to be like, were all online, and they were out of Burlington, Vermont. And I got hooked up with like the New England rep when I was like 15. He gave me a pair of skis, and it just stuck. It like never went away. And like the community aspect of the brand like became more of like a family. So like once I got into it, we all like kind of were on the same page, and like it kind of like as the years went on, kind of just became like this cool thing to be part of. And it was like, Atomic, Rossignol, Solomon, all these other brands, like they didn't ever like treat you like a family. It was kind of like once you were, not performing, they would just let you go. And like Line, like even like when I got hurt and like wasn't performing, they never like put any like pressure on me, or like gave me the feeling that they were gonna drop me, like. And it was like going from a rep rider to like kind of like bottom end of the team to eventually getting onto the pro team. And that whole transition was like they were just like supportive and like had respect for what I had done, what I'm doing, and like where I'm involved in the sport. So I think they just always treat it as like a lot of respect, because they see like the importance in like what I was doing in the coaching side and with the judging. They were like just very supportive of me and my skiing, and yeah, there was no reason to look anywhere else. And I think they just did a really great job, like branding themselves and advocating for the sport rather than podiums or money or whatever it is. They just stuck true to like what the sport was back in the day, and they're still doing the same.
Nice. The other one we have is from Holden Baldassi. Baldazzi. Let me know how to pronounce that, Holden. So, what made you want to get into leather work? Kind of answer that a little bit. Any more collabs with Joystick coming up?
Ooh, that's a good question. Well, we did talk about kind of like I was looking for like something that was just going to last a long time, and the high quality stuff. As I get older, I just hate that we live in like a garbage society where you buy something and you throw it away. So I was like, if I was going to put my time and energy into something, it was like to create something that like has value and is almost like an heirloom where you hold on to it and you pass it down. Like, how many things do you have that are like from your grandparents' era that like still work and you still use? Like, I have a handful of things that like I really appreciate that side. So my goal was to kind of like make something like that, and leather was like the perfect medium. Um, and beyond that, I'm actually like, this is perfect timing because I am working on something right now for Joystick. I'm gonna probably finish it up in the next week, and then you'll see it come out. But yeah, there's something cool that we've been working on, talking about for a while, and it should be here shortly. And if you know what I make, um, there's probably one easy guess of what that product would be.
Nice. Awesome. All right. So, Tom Caruso asks, what was your involvement with the development of the line blade? Because it seems like you're pretty stoked on it at the very least. So, did you have a hand in the development of that?
No, actually, I don't. They worked on that for a while. It was the engineer that has been there for the last couple years, and he basically had this brainchild. And like, being line, they just like wanted to kind of change the game a little bit. And so the last year that Josh Malchek was involved with the brand, I think they were like, they created this product and they're like, who could be like kind of the face of this ski? Like, who is, this ski made for? And I had been kind of like doing a bunch of different things with them, like coming from Park. I ended up like kind of being on their sick day program for a while. So I was kind of promoting the ski that was like all mountain, free ride, fun, light, um, just not specifically a park ski. And so I had like a ton of experience doing that. And so when they came up with this ski, I was just like an easy go to. Also being in Oregon, so I'm super close to Seattle and stuff like that. So I wish I could credit myself for any of the development, but the ski was done and I just had to ski on it. And it was like the easiest ski for me to like actually fall in love with and genuinely um, like say how cool it was. Like, it was something that they worked really hard on, and it just came out like so fun. Like, if you're, I'm at the point where my knees are sore. I'm not really taking a lot of risk in the park, and I just want to have fun on the mountain. And that ski like made the mountain like more exciting with the side cut and the flex. So yeah, I could talk about that ski for a long time because I was like, for the last 2 years, that was like primarily my job on the line side. But yeah, it just was something that like fell into my lap, and I like noticed my little niche on the team, which I'm not going to be competing against Will or Tom in the park. So what can I do? And that's kind of where I put my efforts and really just tried to perfect like the imaging side, and trying to get some video and cool content for them on like a non-specific park ski.
Nice. So, the last question we have, and this is something we kind of glossed over, even though we've talked about these guys all throughout it. Grant Harris asks, What is your favorite traveling circus memory?
Oh man. Like that crew and like what you get to do, it's like so outside of the box that like you just get to do some kind of crazy, wacky things. And so I probably have like a handful of like standout moments, but um, kind of the coolest thing that like I got to experience was the sand skiing episode. And it's all like super experimental. Like a lot of the things they're doing, they just have a vision and go with it. And Will or Andy wanted to try this out because I'd seen like people sandboarding. So they went to the hardware store, bought this material, and we like glued it to the bottom of our skis and just went out and tried it out. But I think at the same time, like we did Mount Adams and we like camped out and hiked up. And I just remember like Eric eating this fish and like so like on the hill there was like cool things that happened, but then outside you're just like hanging out like kind of ski bum life. And so the whole like experience in general was the memory, not like one standout. And because I did a lot of like the Mount Hood episodes, and that was just like, Shane would come out to Hood and we'd ski the park. So I didn't get to do like any of like the Japan or overseas stuff. But I guess the sand skiing was like the most unique thing. And like that is definitely going to be a standout for years like later. And I kind of had this like alternate ego when I was growing up called Jean Jacket Jeff. So like I busted out the jean jacket for that episode. So I was kind of like hanging on to the old school East Coast guy in me. And um, I don't get to tell a story very much anymore, but like I was told like at a very young age to just like wear something that stands out and people like won't forget you, whether you're good or not. And I like that like kind of stuck with me for a while because you'd see a guy on the East Coast, I think his name was Curtis, and he would wear an orange one piece. And no matter who you are or where you were, you saw that guy and you remembered him. And so I kind of like took this like all denim suit for a long time. Every contest I did from like 18 to 21, I would wear a denim suit and just try to stand out. And so I had that alter ego for quite a while, and I eventually grew out of him. But yeah, Jean Jacket Jeff. He's still in there somewhere. I just got to bust him out every once in a while.
Love that. Well, thank you very much for coming on today. It was awesome to chat with you and get to know you. And I wish you the best of luck with your business. You want to leave us off with anything?
No, just I appreciate that you're out there spreading like some awareness of like the sport and getting some people on here. So I'm definitely a listener, and it's cool to get the opportunity to talk to you. And you reached out, I was like, hell yeah, definitely we can have a ski conversation. And yeah, just going into like however my post was received, it is not a retirement. I'm not like quitting and moving on. It was just like wanted to kind of start like a new phase and continue to like have skiing as like my heart and soul, but just not do it from like a sponsored side. Do it for the love.
Hell yeah. All right.